Right. Welcome everybody. My name is Walied. I'm the coordinator for the Scarborough Civic Action Network, which is short for SCAN. SCAN is a nonpartisan community-driven network that aims to support civic engagement, to address inequalities, and mobilize the civic voice for Scarborough. We strive for a prosperous, livable Scarborough for all of us. So we do work on issues that we believe that people in Scarborough want to see addressed. And today we're going to be talking about community safety and how that looks like and how we can make Scarborough a safer place for us to live for all. But before we start, I'm going to start off with the land acknowledgements. I would like to acknowledge that this community center is situated upon the traditional territories. We thank the original caretakers and stewards of this land, which include the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the Khogali, the Hiawatha, Aldeville First Nation, and the Métis Nation. The treaty that was signed for this particular parcel of land is collectively referred to as the Williams Treaty of 1923 and applies to lands east of Woodbine Avenue. I also recognize the enduring presence of Aboriginal people on this land. We are mindful of this land and the responsibility we hold within it under the Dish with One Spoon covenant to share and care for this land. The work of SCAN is about civic voice and inclusion. It is important for us to remind ourselves of all the communities living here in Scarborough. As settlers on this land, we must confront our own privileges and the notions of solidarity with Indigenous communities on Turtle Island. We recognize the gruesome and dark history of Canada upon Indigenous people. We also acknowledge those who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And so we honor and pay tribute to ancestors of African origin and descent. Living on this territory makes all people in Toronto Treaty people, including those who came here as settlers or immigrants of this generation or earlier generations. We're all responsible for uprooting and dismantling the colonial white supremacist forces and continue to oppress Indigenous people today. For tonight's gathering, we center our intentions around this land's covenants of only taking what we need, leaving space for others, and keeping the space cared for. Thank you, everybody. So for today, we're going to be hearing from different speakers. We have Walied Khogali, who is the co-chair of the Regent Park Social Development Plan, which has resulted in 0 gun deaths in Regent Park since 2023. Then we have Jasminder, who works for Victim Services Toronto. And just running a little bit late, we have City Councillor Parthi Kandavel, who's the newly elected Scarborough Southwest Councillor. So we're going to be hearing from them talking about how their perspectives on community safety and how it can be applied here in Scarborough and make things better. So I think we're going to start off with Walied. Walied has lived in Regent Park with his family since 2005. He is known for working with residents from all backgrounds to create safe, inclusive, sustainable communities that are free from discrimination and hate. As a Canadian Muslim who immigrated from Sudan, he has experienced firsthand what it's like to be a newcomer youth growing up in Toronto. He has worked to champion issues such as affordable housing, transit, and environmental stewardship, equity, and human rights in both communities, in both the community and across Toronto. Walied is elected resident co-chair of both the Community Benefits Oversight Working Group and the Community Building Working Group of the Region Social Development Plan. He's also an active and proud board member of the Hospitalities Worker Training Center. So Walied, you have the floor.
Thank you, everyone. I usually, when I do a talk like this with this amount of people, we'll sit around in a circle. You know, I don't like this dynamic of, you know. So if you can't hear me, please let me know and I will raise my voice. I want to make sure that everyone is able to be part of this important conversation. So first of all, thank you, Walied. Thank you for the invitation. I'm a big fan of SCAN and the work that's been done in Scarborough. Scarborough, in my opinion, is almost like our adopted home. It's so diverse. It's faced challenges like other parts of Toronto. There's been sometimes neglect when it comes to resources that are needed, whether it's in transit, whether it's in housing, whether it's in the social infrastructure that are desperately needed by the residents of Scarborough. I just wanted to let you all know I'm an ally in that effort. I do my very best to ensure that investments are made in Scarborough. When Walied asked me to talk about the social development plan, I said this is an important topic. It's an important story that I wish was shared across the city of Toronto. But I'm going to give you some context before I get into the SDP and why there was a call by our residents of Regent Park for social development plan. And I'm also going to talk about what's happening in surrounding neighborhoods like Moss Park, right? Like St. Jamestown, and the efforts that are resident-led as well. So, in my bio, Walied spoke about when I moved into the neighborhood. And you know, in 2005, Regent Park was a very different place, right? All the buildings looked the same. Everyone came from the same socioeconomic background. Most of the folks that lived there, I think almost 100% of the folks that lived there were on rent geared to income, RGI. And just as a reminder, we've always defined affordability based on income, okay? Rent geared to income, right? That's what we knew. And I'll tell you why that's important later on. So, you know, one of the stories I love telling is how when I used to work at U of T, I used to be the executive director of the Students' Union, you know, made some good money, had enough savings. My mom came and begged me. She's like, Walied, buy this house. It's only $330,000. Put a $5,000 down payment, pay a $600 mortgage, and you're good. And you know, in my faith, they say paradise lies at the feet of your mom, right? And my dad was like, it's too expensive now, you can wait. And I wish I listened to my mom. I really do. Because if I sat in the living room for 5 years, my equity will grow from $300,000 to $1.2 million. And that's not because of anything special that I've done. It's just because of speculation in the housing market. So this is the crisis we're living in right now. It's called the housing crisis. And the reason I bring that important pretext is because there was also speculation in Regent Park. Due to decades of neglect by our provincial, federal, and municipal government, the housing was not maintained. And there was this agenda pushed on to residents of a public-private partnership. A public-private partnership to build more housing, to invest in the maintenance of housing. And you know, one of the commitments that were made by the developers and the government was we will not displace the residents of Regent Park. That there will be no gentrification. And gentrification basically means is when you can't afford to live in your community and you have to move out. Okay? So that's the commitment they made. And they introduced an amazing home ownership program that I championed today. And it's an amazing program. All you have to do is live in the community for 20 years, qualify for the program, which is funded by both the provincial and federal government, and guess what? You will become a homeowner. And all the debt that you owed after 20 years will be forgiven. They had a debt forgiven provision in this amazing program. It's called the Boost and Foundational Program. And it's important for you folks to know because we are talking about those solutions today. So, coming back to the topic, the social development plan. Residents of Regent Park understood that you cannot have a successful revitalization if you do not invest in the people. It's not about investing just in buildings. So what we did is we came together as a community and petitioned our government to invest in a social development plan. And what we did is we sat down through focus groups, we got organized, we got the support of agencies in that service Regent Park, because there's a lot of money coming to Regent Park. We got the grassroots organizations, there were a few back then, but we had a lot of resident leaders. We had a lot of people that deeply care about the community. And we were able to successfully convince City Council to invest $2.5 million in the social development plan for over a span of 5 years. So this investment initially came to the community in 2019, and the first phase of that investment is going to end this year in 2024. The reason why we thought this investment is very important is because we wanted to build capacity in residents to be able to achieve their full potential, right? To be able to stay within their community. So we had 4 focus areas: employment and economic development, and you probably know why that's important. And the other focus was the safety network, and I'm gonna focus a lot on the safety network because it's important. Then we have got the communications working group, and then the community building working group. So we focused our efforts in community building, safety, communications, so everyone knows what's going on, and good jobs through the employment and economic development working group. Those were the priorities that residents chose, right? And what we did is we made sure that when council passed the motion, they said, this money, it's not just a general grant, anyone can apply for. It is to fund the action priorities of those working groups. And we created a neighborhood table called the Regent Park Stakeholders Table. And by the way, it's a big group, so like 100 members that usually attend these meetings. And it's representative of all the stakeholders, residents, both Toronto Community Housing residents, as well as market residents, agencies, grassroots organizations, the City of Toronto, and other stakeholders, right? They're really, it's such an important model because that is how we held each other accountable, right? So that's the first piece. The other piece is the neighborhood association. So unlike many other communities, where neighborhood associations have to, basically fundraise and just to keep going, we were able to secure funding from the city to have staff for the neighborhood association. So the neighborhood association wasn't just a group of just residents. It was resourced as well because of the SDP. So we were able to secure SIF funds, which are funds from the City of Toronto to make it possible. And the Regent Park Neighborhood Association, which I'm a co-chair of, became the first to ever receive funding, which is amazing. And I hope this model continues. So what do we do at the SDP? Well, we have a planning committee, and that planning committee is informed by the co-chairs of the working group, but also members, residents. And then we also have other committees. One important committee is called the Evaluations and Benchmark Committee. And the Evaluation and Benchmark Committee helps us track indicators. So are residents feeling safe? Are residents happy with our amazing Sunday in the Park event that brings residents together? Are residents happy with the projects coming out of the safety network? We collect that data, and we calculate how do we best work together to improve the outcomes for the year after. So evaluations and benchmarks. We also have something called the funding committee. And actually the funding committee was such an instrumental committee because it helped us secure other resources beyond the City of Toronto. So for example, we got federal funding to address anti-Black racism within the SDP. We received hundreds of thousands of dollars thanks to the support of our local MP and Minister Marcy Ian, right? So we leverage relationships that we have with our elected officials to secure more resources for our community. So what is the work of the safety network? Well, the safety network is a forum for residents to talk about the safety concerns that they have. It could be as simple as lighting, in certain streets, there's no adequate lighting. It could be focused on programs that youth need in our community to better address, the challenges of a culture that promotes gangs and other pieces, right? It's like, how do we intervene and support our youth? How do we support local organizations that are doing this important work? One of my favorite one is Healing Us One, which was started by my brother, and it's actually not just created a forum or a safe space for youth, but help them secure a good job or a career. A lot of the young men in our community and young women in our community, some of them have had a criminal record, and they could not find a good job, or they could not find an opportunity to work. So through these programs and intervention, we were able to support the youth that wanted to make that change. We also had innovative programs like Speaking with Confidence. We had understood some of the folks living in our community, they're worried about their accent getting in the way when they speak at meetings. They're worried about not understanding the words, the diction was too complicated, right? So we created workshops to address that need specifically, right? So it was about capacity building. That's the other point that I want to raise when it comes to the work of the safety network. So how did we get there? How did we move from a community with a reputation, a really bad reputation of crime, gun violence, we're always in the news, someone's getting shot, right? To a much more better reputation of being a much more cohesive community. We did that by working together. And how we did that was we kept track of the interventions that were made and which ones worked and which didn't. So the SDP, another thing that you need to remember about the SDP, it's a change, a changing model. There's a specific term, I just completely forgot it right now, but it's a change management model. Exactly, that's the word I was going to use. It adapts. And we adapt through something called the refresh. So we did an SDP refresh where we got input from residents, but we also got input from the public, the broader public. What can we do better? What have we not thought of, right? And then incorporated those ideas to change the SDP for the better, right? So that's one important attribute of the SDP. Now, in 2023, we had 0 gun-related deaths in Regent Park. And I'm so proud of that accomplishment, right? What do you all think about 0 gun-related deaths in our community? Right? I know the councillor likes it. Thank you, Parthi, for joining us. Yeah, 0 gun-related deaths was critical to making the case that we need to invest in our communities, that this is not going to work if you don't invest in the people, if you don't invest in the right interventions to help residents find their own solutions, to empower the community, right? To listen to the critical voices within the community so we could do better. And this effort and this result actually is recognized across the city of Toronto. We had the mayor not too long ago publicly state that these investments work and we need to make investments like the one in Regent Park in other parts of the city, right? That means it's working. So there is now a movement in Moss Park for a social development plan. In St. Jamestown, residents are talking about how investments are needed in that community. And I believe that if we have a social development plan in every neighborhood across the city of Toronto, we will set ourselves up for success, right? And that's why this conversation is so important. We need to start thinking about how do we empower residents like yourself, stakeholders like yourself, through a social development plan in this neighborhood. And there's actually a process by which you're able to secure those funds. And it starts with the support of your city councillor. It starts with the important deputations and the committees of city council to help build a case, a staff report, making that recommendation from SDFA, which is the unit of the city that's responsible for supporting the social development plans. And then the support of the executive committee and the budget committee and city council, right? Because this is an investment by the city in the community. And if we want to save money in the long term, save money in policing, for example, I don't want to live in a city where I wake up and the annual budget is no longer $1 billion, it's $2 billion or $3 billion. I think those are resources that could be better spent in our communities. It leads to better outcomes in the long term. Safety being one of those critical areas. So I want to thank you for listening to what I have to say. I was asked to focus on the SDP, so that's why I'm here. But if you want to speak about other issues, you can always reach out to me after this talk, and we can have that important conversation. So thank you once again to SCAN, and thank you to all of you for paying attention. I don't know if you have any questions, but Walied will be moderating that.
Everyone, give me a huge round of applause. I have questions. So I have a question to get started, and then if you have a minute to think of your own. So after going through the social development plan in Regent Park, and starting it from scratch and going through it for over a year, what lessons do you think you've learned that maybe you would adapt differently if a new neighborhood wants to do a social development plan?
Well, you need the support of the public. You need the support of the broader City of Toronto, our elected officials. So it's important to document the impact of the investments that are coming in the community. And at a bare minimum, you should start making that ask they did. Listen, Scarborough can't be the forgotten part of the City of Toronto, right? We need investments in this important community as well. So you have the case. You just need to articulate the case. And you need to broaden this effort, have community conversations like this. You know, when we were doing the first iteration of the SDP, there were hundreds of residents, 200 residents in the room. And when an elected official walks in, or when a staff of the City of Toronto or a policy sees this amount of people invested in this effort, it's hard to say no. The other piece of advice is depute in the committees of City Council. Make it clear that you as a resident support a social development plan for your community, right? Because that way it's on public record, but you're also winning people over. The people who watch your remarks on YouTube or read your letter on the City of Toronto website will appreciate the nuances and why it's so critically important to invest in the community and invest in a social development plan, right? So my advice to all of you is spread the good news. Don't keep this to yourself. Go out there, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your family, get them involved in it. You'll be surprised how many family members I see as part of the SDP, because people really care about the community. When we think of communities, what is it? It's an amalgamation of families and individuals that deeply care about this community, right? So spread the news, get a campaign website started, start collecting petitions, start meeting with your councillor regularly about the importance of investment in a social development plan for your community. And before you know it, you will have those resources, and better yet, you will be changing people's lives. I promise you that. You will be changing people's lives for the better, and most importantly, you'll be making your community much safer. Thank you.
Next question.
Approximately, in duration of time factor, how long would that take? And realistically, with the help of the city, for example, resources like 311, resources like MPPs, and trustees and wards. Now, if you reach out to trustees and wards at MPP offices, and you have sent emails about the concerns and safeties of what's going on in your community, and the response that you're provided with is not a positive response, what do you do then?
Well said.
What do you do then? Because
what do? You remind everyone that's involved in this project that the power lies in the community. We started off as a community coalition, right? And guess what? We set expectations. At our coalition meetings, we wanted our elected officials there, a city councillor, our MPP, an MP, so a provincial member of parliament and our federal member of parliament. Because you know what? Investments in our city is not just the City of Toronto jurisdiction. City of Toronto is the lead, but the funds come from other levels of government as well. And we need to champion that effort, that you shouldn't ignore the community that you represent. So it's about holding all of us accountable, right? Including our elected officials, including our staff at the City of Toronto, including those that are responsible for developing policy or making recommendations. And you do so by meeting with them, by getting them on board and on side, and then it's lobbying, it's advocacy behind the scenes, right? So that the stars aligned, and that everyone understands the importance of that investment, and they take a chance with this amazing community. They say, let's make those investments. Why not? You know, instead of relocating it to policing or to enforcement, which we know does not work in the long term. If we don't intentionally create good jobs in our community, if we don't create opportunities, if we don't create community, we will never be safe. You know, I say we keep us safe, right? We as a community keep us safe. We've got to watch each other. We've got to go to each other's funerals. We go to each other's community celebrations. If we don't have a sense of community, if we're not willing to know who our neighbors are, then we're not there. I'm gonna be honest with you. I know every neighbor on my street by name. I know the kids that live there, right? I have that relationship. They bring me food to my home, right? When they know my mom or someone else is not feeling well. This is the relationship that I have with my neighbors. And it starts there, because that's the trust that you need, and that would be effective in the long term, because you can exchange notes. You can say, hey, I'm going to this meeting, can you join us? Can we prep for this meeting so we can make this case, right? So it also requires local resident leadership, right? And this is what's in this room, right? This is all of you. This is it, okay? You are the magic that's gonna make this work.
And what would be your first step in order to petition and create a campaign for that type of resources for the greater good of Scarborough and our entire city that is at threat in terms of a lot of safety concerns? And it's horrible, but there is a solution. There is a way to work together, not be deceitful, but be truthful and honest, and put oneself out there to advocate for those who don't have a voice, for those who have been, say, mistreated, misunderstood, and are too intimidated by municipalities to say something on behalf of their community, their country, or themselves. So in a situation like that, or a scenario like this, who other than the electives can be contacted to support those visions?
It's an excellent question. We actually did something called a learning circle with the Lawrence Heights community. So the folks who are responsible for the Regent Park Social Development Plan met with residents in Lawrence Heights to tell them, hey, here's what you need to watch out for. Okay, here's where we could have done things better. Right? Here's where there's an opportunity. So we need to build relationships between communities as well, right? Because that will help you appreciate the road ahead. But it starts in the community. The way I see it is, it starts with a process that's based on integrity. What I mean by that is bringing residents into a room where you create a vision of your social development plan. It doesn't have to be the Regent Park social development plan. It could be catered to Scarborough, right? There could be specific priorities for Scarborough that need to be better resourced or supported. There may be things that are working that you know of, that you wanna to continue. There are things that are not working. This is an opportunity for you to learn from other communities what works instead. So it requires a lot of organizing, So, how many organizers are in this room, by the way? How many people are
Everyone,
organizers?
raise your hand.
Come on,
Every
you're all
single person.
organizers, including our city councilor. That's the best organizer right here. Okay? You have to be an organizer, right? You have to be able to bring residents together, people that care about an issue together. You need to be able to convene those meetings, brainstorm, come up with your goals and what you really want to get done, and not take no for an answer. Don't take no for an answer, ever.
Amen.
Right? If there's a will, there's a way, and it will get done, right? I've seen it happen many times.
Thank you, also.
When you were talking earlier, you mentioned of, I believe it was some kind of grant or financial assistance program in the city of Toronto. But all I remember was the acronym SDFA. What does that stand for?
SDFA, you don't ask our council to answer that question.
Social Development Finance Administration.
Exactly.
Sorry,
Social Development Finance Administration.
and obviously, now that you're here, obviously I didn't see you sit over there. Has any group here
I
in
didn't want to
Scarborough?
interrupt when I came in.
I see.
Sorry.
Has any group in Scarborough Southwest applied for that since you got elected as city councilor?
I don't believe so. But this is why I'm here, to learn and
Right.
to connect dots. Thank you,
I
Charles.
think I saw a question in the back.
Oh, yes. So, I heard everything you said. I see that, and you keep saying in Scarborough. Do you realize how large Scarborough is?
It's huge.
It is not compared. Regent Park is just sitting one little end in Scarborough. So I hear what you're saying about the Regent Park, but Scarborough is very huge and very diverse. Depending on which neighborhood you are in. So, when you keep saying Scarborough can't, it's like, maybe where I am in Scarborough, it would be something different. Maybe where somebody's up there is something different, as for safety. So in your social planning and development that you have, so what you were saying is that because of that, that's the reason why there was no, I didn't say gun violence, but you said there was no gun deaths. That's what I realized you said. It's not that there was no gun violence, there was no gun deaths
Yes.
in 2023. So you're saying, you're equating to having that, because of that, that's what brought the outcome to no gun deaths? Is that what you're saying?
I will clarify.
Yeah.
So when I meant Scarborough, I meant neighborhoods in Scarborough, right? And why being very specific with neighborhoods? Because Regent Park is a neighborhood,
Yeah, I know.
right? Most Park is a neighborhood.
I know that.
So it has to be a neighborhood approach.
I know that.
And the model in Regent Park is not the same model in a neighborhood in Scarborough. It could be different, right? What I meant when I said there was 0 gun-related deaths in 2023, I actually applaud all the initiatives that happened in Regent Park that were youth-focused. They were focused on mental health, the cultural appropriate therapy provided by WANASA, the youth interventions done by Healing Us One, or Football for All, or Regent Park Mental Health Care. Like, there's so many groups that have received funding through the social development plan that have had an impact on families and youth in crisis, that I believe, because of those interventions, we had 0 gun-related deaths. Because I'm not gonna give TPS the credit for it, I'm gonna give the community the credit for that, right? Because of our interventions that were led by the community, right?
No.
So, in my opinion, I think it's important to realize that without these interventions, our community will our neighborhood will never get safer, right? Because poverty is the underlying reason why there's crime, right? So you need to address the root causes of poverty, and those interventions to do so.
And you haven't answered my question.
Yeah.
Ask you a direct question, and then you give me more details now.
My answer is yes.
Which I don't understand, but you
Yeah.
give me more details into it.
Yes.
I asked you a question, was it that? Then
Yes.
you wanted to that.
Yes.
That's all I asked.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, thank you. So I think maybe we take one last question and then we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you so much for the work you're doing. I have a 2-part question. The first question is, can you maybe speak to the steps that you took in Regent Park to create some structure in terms of bringing residents together to form some of these committees. You talked a bit about organizational structure and so on. So I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to that a bit. And I think the second thing, I think I know where you're going with this. I think that Scarborough is really different in terms of neighborhoods. In terms of each neighborhood may only have a certain capacity in terms of like space, for example, right? We know that space is limited in certain neighborhoods.
Exactly.
And so in Dorset Park, for example, in this community, space is extremely limited. We have one community center just up the road here that is open to young people, but it's also open at a limited time as well. And so you have young people that sit idle, and then you have the hub, right? So we have two main spaces, and the hours oftentimes, speaking specifically for young people, the times aren't conducive to youth.
Exactly.
At all.
I
So
agree with you.
I know Regent Park has lots of stuff, right? Lots of parks, lots of green space, but geographically very different than this neighborhood, for example. So if I just rephrase, so the first question, if you can maybe speak to some of the steps that you took to bring folks together. I guess the second piece was just a comment.
So I'll start with the second piece and I'll address your first
Sure.
piece.
Sure.
Space has always been an issue. We don't have enough space in Regent Park, to be honest with you. We had a building called Daniel Spectrum. They came up, they became a community benefits because the developer, Daniels, secured funding, federal funding, to make that a community space. And then we as a neighborhood association, so the establishment of a neighborhood association in every neighborhood is important because you need those dedicated group of neighbors that are going to push that agenda, that are going to be the thing that connect people, right? You need that. So that's on a process level. But when we knew that Tridel was going to take over the development of phases 4 and 5, I led a process through the community building working group to do a space needs report to inform their communities services and facilities report. So it's a report that developers have to put together that addresses the space needs of the community, outdoor and indoor, by the way. And I can send Goulet that report as an example if you'd like to see it, okay? Anyone who wants to see it. It's really awesome, by the way. 29 organizations, 29 grassroots organizations that service thousands of residents in Regent Park participated in that report. And we insisted on the developer to include it in the rezoning application, which was approved last year in December. And one of the commitments is a 10,000 square foot space for phases 4 and 5, in addition to other space that's going to be connected to a library as well. So we looked at mixed use for space, spaces for entrepreneurship, space for youth programming, space for resident capacity building, space for almost everything, right? So space is always going to be an issue. The challenge is, are you going to have a developer partner and an amazing city councillor that's going to advocate for more space? So if a development's coming up into your community by a for-profit developer, is there consideration for affordable housing there? But is also there consideration for community space, right? That's how you're gonna create space in your neighborhood. Innovative programs for youth. Actually, one of the amazing programs that I loved that was funded by the SDP was Healing Us One, an amazing charitable organization, said, we need a safe space for our youth. There's no place to hang out in the neighborhood after a certain time. So what do? We took over the 3rd floor of Dino Spectrum, had space for movies, for learning, for chess. People want to play chess, for people who want help with their homework. Imagine, we had tutors right there in the evening helping young people get better at math, get better at science, so they could succeed. Like, that was driven by youth. It was youth mentoring youth. And that is amazing, right? But this was an innovative program that came from the youth because we were listening to the youth.
Thank you.
We have to create a forum and a space for the youth to bring up their own ideas that will work for them, that will work for how they operate, how they interact, and support them. Instead of like picking up a textbook and saying you need to do this. Because you also need buy-in. We so participate. I walked up to the third floor, I can't remember which day, it was packed. It was all these teenagers, young people, 10, 9, 8, young people. And their parents, whenever they came and picked them up, they had the biggest smile in their face. Because they knew their kids were safe, they knew their kids were getting the best mentorship and supports, and they knew their kids were on a pathway for success, right? Because of the investments made in our community. So, and they became loyal supporters until today. You know, we have hundreds of parents, not families, that will back the SDP because they see its impact on the ground. Now, with regards to process, it starts with a core group supported, for example, by a neighborhood association, which is another core group. It requires, if you have Toronto Community Housing as a partner, their support to connect with tenants, them being stakeholders in this work as well. So they redirect communication related to this work to the tenants as well, or private operators of buildings, get their support, get them committed to this project. And then create a space for visioning. Everyone will buy into this project if they have a voice in what it looks like, or what the outcomes are. So that is critical. And after visioning, then it's simply organizing committees to focus on certain things. And you'll be impressed by how many people are so dedicated to the community that they'll show up to these meetings, bring the best ideas forward, and move towards implementation later on. Like there's people I know in Regent Park that I can count on to show up to a meeting, right? So that's the process. And the other piece is documenting it. You know, it's critical to invest in the infrastructure to document the amazing work that's been done, because you have to tell your story to the broader public, especially if you're trying to secure more investments, especially if you want to hand your councillor the tools and the knowledge to be able to articulate at council why these investments are critical. You need to, you know, document what are the actions coming out of this meeting, what led to this process, right? And remember that you have friends. You have friends like me. You have friends in Regent Park that are willing to come here, spend an hour in transit or more, come to this community and help each one of you succeed, right? And I think we have a commitment from a core of residents living in a neighborhood. This is very doable, very doable.
All right, everyone give a huge round of applause to me. All right, next we have Councillor Parthi Kandavel. If you want to come up. I'm just going to read out your bio very quickly. Parthi was elected on November 30th, 2023, so he's brand new to City Council as a councillor for Scarborough Southwest. During his campaign, he championed the need for better transit, more childcare services, affordable housing, and responsible development, and more transparent local government decision making. He's committed to continue to provide a voice for residents of Scarborough Southwest in their efforts to build a healthy, flourishing communities for themselves and their family. Yeah, so everyone, give it a round of applause to Parthi.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be here and see some familiar faces in the audience from my time in the community. I grew up in Scarborough since I was 6 years old, so I've seen, I think we've all seen changes in so many different ways. I want to start off with thanking Walied. I've known you for a few years now, and I've always knew you're a talented brother, but I was very, taken aback by your communication, your substantive points, very, very relevant to our community in Scarborough, because it's, it's very diverse. People don't get that, right? And I appreciate you as a downtown guy, recognizing that Scarborough's often forgotten, and it's very ironic. We have sometimes downtown progressives who, but it's really about their backyard, right? And not about where the need is, right? And this is why SDFA and having a structural lens is so important, because we have to ask the question, who gets what money, right? And very oftentimes, and you guys know this, Scarborough's treated as one neighborhood.
Exactly.
You know, we're almost the same size as Brampton and Mississauga, bigger than Ottawa and Windsor. Well, not maybe not Ottawa, but Windsor and London. But we're treated as one neighborhood, which is, you know, doesn't do justice to the diversity of Scarborough. Obviously, not just by race, but by the built form of our neighborhoods. We've got neighborhoods that are doing well, that don't need supports, and we've got neighborhoods like where I grew up in Kennedy Park, where Augusta is from, Augusta. And, you know, you've got Chester Lee, you've got Malvern, of course, you've got Cataraqui, and that was, you know, in the media this Monday. I woke up to the news on Monday of a very tragic, disheartening news of a 16-year-old boy in my community. I live around the corner from Cataraqui, right? I grew up next to Elbowworth, opposite of the Giant Tiger. I live at Warden and Danforth, near a TCHC complex, which now I have the privilege of being on the board. And this is, it's so disheartening to see the complete lack of media attention that received. Many of you will remember in 2007, Jordan Manners, right? That was, I hate to use the word, but blockbuster media coverage across the board. And the premier and the mayor at the time, to their credit, gave it a lot of attention. You may remember Julian Falconer did the Roots of Youth Violence report, a huge 200-page report that looked at primarily the lack of investment, right? But that doesn't get the same attention. And it didn't get it in 2022, where we had 2 teenage homicides on school property in 2022. I was a school trustee at the time. David Mary Thompson, which is not too far from here, right? Cold-blooded. You know, a 14-year-old doesn't come to school and make that decision overnight. That's a failure by multiple civic institutions, City of Toronto, the TDSB, the social agencies to make that. And later that year, Woburn, the school I went to as a high school student, we saw another one, Halloween Day, I remember that. Again, just outside the front steps. So we've got issues that are unique to certain neighborhoods that we haven't seen the attention paid, right? So I really appreciate you, Walied, sharing with the community here your strategy, because you were successful in Regent Park. But now, I think there's hope, because I see more of us from different parts of Scarborough coming together to address that. I also want to appreciate Jamal Meyer's staff, Brian, who's in the back, being attentive here, attending today, because that's important, because we need to connect the dots between the diverse and vast area of Scarborough to articulate and advocate for Scarborough needs and Scarborough concerns. And this is where I'd like to close, and I want to take questions, because I think there's a lot of learning there, is that we need to articulate that. We've got SCRO, we've got Sun, Rhoda, and Ron in the house. I really appreciate you guys coming out. But we need to pinpoint and share, especially with this mayor who's made commitments in her budget, right? That the evidence is clear, we're underserved here. And this is something, you know, I want to work with the community and get that, like you said, working with staff to articulate where we're underserved, right? Because often say, oh, I've lost track of how many times people would say Regent Park, Rexdale, and Scarborough. As if there's any sort of scale, without any sort of scale of comparison. So that's something we need to unpack and address as a community. And the reality is, not every elected official is responsive, right? But this is where we have to work together. Obviously, you know, I hate to be so frank and blunt, but you know, my first priority is to my ward, and we've got issues in Cataraqui that we need to address. Gordon Ridge, we've had a couple of you know, issues there, but you know, I really want to learn about the revitalization, because TCHC is looking at that. So next steps, I chair the city school board's committee, and one of the things that on our June 18th agenda, because of what happened in Cataraqui on Monday, we're going to address youth violence. We're going to start looking at the budget. That's where we need to start the conversation. And this is where getting your involvement and participation is so critical. Making change is not overnight, and that's something I think we all have learned in our different advocating strategies and experiences. We can't flip a switch. It needs to build the argument. We do that through different elected officials, through working with staff and committee work, making deputations. And we've got to articulate that voice that we need SDFA plans for different neighborhoods in Scarborough. We need to address how community spaces are used differently. We're underserved here. And especially given the development that's coming to Scarborough, that's a completely different topic, but you must know 50 high rises, concrete jungles, I'll be blunt, right? At Scarborough Town Center, Golden Mile, Scarborough Junction, my ward, each, right? Shepherd, we're seeing a whole flurry, but very little clarity on what social investments are coming with that. So that needs to be part of the discussion, right? So we're saying, we're getting shoved down our throat, build, 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 we need supply. Yes, we've got a housing crisis, that's not our issue, but how do we do it in a way that's equitable and fair and addressing the existing inequities that serve? So these are part of the discussions, and one of the things I want to advance in this subcommittee is, because we can't make decisions, we advise the executive committee, who the mayor chairs, is school boards like Glamorgan around the corner, there's multiple, Winston Churchill, how do we make them accessible for city staff? Because the city's got more budget than the TDSB, because we see the underfunding by this provincial government for schools. If cities got the money, we're raising taxes, then if the school boards can provide the land and the facility and the space, can we not now provide programming, because we don't have to build community centers through, and we need to address these logistical and operational bureaucracy that make it very challenging, right? And that's something we have to address in making more community space and programming. I'll give you a personal example. You know where I live. For our 2-year-old, to take her to toddler basketball and soccer programs, sadly, we can't find anything in South Scarborough. We've got to cross the border of Victoria Park to use S.H. Armstrong and Duke of Connaught. These are privileged, upper middle class neighborhoods in the beach. But we don't have that east of Vic Park. It's glaring. I've lost track how many times I've brought that up in 5 months of city council. But the data is there, right? And this is where I have a lot of hope. A month ago, one of my staff members, Bovin, some of you know, he's a university student. He heads the Scarborough students in public policy. I was really blown away by their caliber, and they're all Scarborough students for the most part, who grew up here, who understand how systems work, how academia works, and we're starting, looking at how do we track and catalog using data, using maps, right? Using ratios, population to service, how we're underserved. So I've got hope is as we come together, different walks of life, different experiences, especially how long we've lived in Scarborough, where there's a lot that brings us together that can start to call out. And to me, it doesn't matter if you're orange, red, or blue, whatever political party or level of government. Is your agenda Scarborough or not? A lot of people say it. They're trying to hop on a wave. You see, we're the only part of Toronto that has an Instagram page, Scarborough Spots, over 100K followers. You don't see a downtown spots. You don't see an Etobicoke spots. You don't see a North York spots. We have a very distinct identity and culture here that's marked by working and middle class families from different backgrounds who've been living really well. I loved a couple of my friends have done very well. The other day we were having drinks and they said, it's the Scarborough privilege, right? And we're trying to get to that. And what's the Scarborough privilege? It's the concept that we know how to handle tough situations and negotiate with funny and tough characters because we grew up here and having a sense of the different dynamics. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, but we have a lot going for us. We need to stay united and connected, and I'm looking to Goulet and Scan and Scro, but to just keep everyone's emails, phone numbers, to have these conversations. Even if nothing comes out of it tangibly right away, we're building community, we're building conversation, And eventually something will come, right? Whether it's about housing, whether it's about the lack of social investments in infrastructure. So
Awareness and change.
exactly, right?
Awareness and change.
Yes, yes. And then
For
this,
future, present,
yeah,
and for the ones that were here
yeah.
and are looking down.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very good way, a good important point that we have a duty and obligation to those
do.
who didn't survive. So because of lack of social investments and taking things seriously, that those situations happen, and you know, and Walied spoke really well to it. So I'm happy to take any questions
Thank
and
you.
go from it. Charles.
Well-
Charles, I've known Charles for 18 years. Charles, do you remember when we first met, Charles?
Didn't we only meet, when you ran against Gary?
No,
in
no.
2022?
Charles, I'm disheartened. I'm shocked you don't remember. We met 2006. I
You paid
first got
attention to him
involved
then.
in politics, Charles, with Scarborough Southwest.
There was the municipal
No,
election
no,
that
no,
year.
before
Liberal
that.
MP Tom O'Gall. Anyway, let's get to your
You mean
question,
his
Charles.
public forums?
Yeah, yeah. No, it was Tom O'Pell used to have
Public
monthly
forums,
meetings.
when he was an MP.
Yes, that's where we met, Charles. But let's go
Sorry,
to
I
your
don't
question.
remember that at all. And obviously, it's great you're carrying on the practice of having the Ask Me Anything activity ever since you got
Thank you,
elected.
thank you, Charles.
That stated, Parthi, you made a slight mistake when you said it doesn't matter if you're orange, blue, or red. You forgot to include green
Thank
as
you.
well.
Mike.
And of course, it's possible that in the years to come, people will be elected from other correct political parties that wrongfully don't have any representation right now.
Correct.
Now, sorry, I'm just,
It's okay, Charles.
It's okay.
I
threw you off.
yeah,
Gather your thoughts. It's okay, Charles.
We can come back if you want, Charles.
well, actually, when I asked him earlier, I didn't have the opportunity to write it down. You obviously mentioned SDFA when I asked you, what does it stand for again?
Social development, finance, and administration.
And when did that come into being?
That's a good question. Walied may know better. One of the things I'm asking my staff and some of the young people that were part of our kind of thing is to look at the budget. And really clear question, who gets what, right? I hope we get those answers from our senior staff. And then let's plot it on a map.
Did it come into being when David Miller was mayor or only after?
SDFA, I think around when Miller was mayor, the SDFA existed.
In other words, somewhere between 2003 and 2010.
So may I ask, have the numbers in terms of statistic data, have they declined in terms of overall, in terms of environment, education, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of medical sector, in terms of
Like government investments?
government investments,
Yeah.
has that declined?
No, our taxes have gone up,
No,
they've
our taxes
increased,
have
but the
gone up.
question is, where have they gone?
So economically, I'm talking about on an economical,
Yeah.
grander scale, for the greater good of mankind, for the human beings that reside on Earth, not artificial intelligence, humans. So there's a difference. Because I've seen recently an article in the Forbes, FORBS, and there's a chart. And according to, from, COVID had a very massive negative impact on our communities, on our country, on our
Mental health.
mental health,
Yes.
our services,
Yeah.
public services, you name it. And all I can remember is cuts, and more cuts. But then there's a big question mark. All these cuts are being done, but what's happening to coincide all those cuts? Where is all those beneficial resources and elements that existed? Where are they? Where have they gone? So I'd be going to the Toronto Recreational Community Center, for example, and ask for a Toronto guide, only to be told that, oh, we discontinued, go online and register. Then you go online, you go through the process and enter the appropriate information in each field, and then when you get to the payment section, you're stuck. You can't go any further. Then you gotta call the main line, 416-333-888, and then you're sitting on the phone for 30 minutes. You give them a code, a family ID code, then you give them an identification, a personal code, and they're still not able to assist. And I'm sitting there wondering, for the love of Christ, all of these resources had existed. Now, I had to go all the way to Etobicoke just to attend a ballet class, where I should have the option and the privilege in Scarborough to be able to attend one of my local community centers, because it's convenient, it's close to home, I can even walk and save $3, $4, $5 and buy maybe a drink and even buy a sandwich and not starve to death or go to bed hungry, and still be able to have resources that are realistical in our economy.
Gotcha. No, I completely.
So I don't hear certain talks at the table. I don't hear certain legislators pushing that envelope, pushing that agenda. So in Scarborough's been more than neglected, and there has been a lot of children, parents, families who have been dramatically affected, and they feel imprisoned, because once they open their front doors and they go outside of their home, it's like, expect everything? No.
And this is a very important point about, you know, we're seeing these 50-story towers all next to each other kind of being proposed, and it's not humane. It's not humane. There
No,
needs
that's
to be,
inhumane.
and when you and we see this quite often, because there are
That's like
many.
a concentration camp.
What we, I'm not, so we have many families who are looking for 2-3 bedroom, but you look at how much are being proposed, it's 10%. So yeah, I wanted to make sure there's enough space for other questions.
I know that like I have friends who have difficulties finding jobs in Scarborough. They even have like connection with employment services in Ontario with the job developer, and they're still not hiring in Scarborough. I think like employment like is very important.
You know,
There's many places like Metro, many places in Scarborough that are just not hiring. It's so hard to find jobs, and some people they're stressed out. They have to go all the way to downtown to work, like maybe take over 2 hours.
you know, that's a very good point. I've been hearing it from a lot of young people who are discouraged in even finding a minimum wage $16 an hour job, and that's the employment opportunities need to be addressed, and it's part of a larger conversation. Raise your hand if you heard the Premier's really repulsive comments today. Incredibly repulsive. He took the anti-Semitic, hateful attacks on 2 Jewish schools. And what did he say? He blamed it on immigrants. Right? He blamed it on immigrants. And the reason I bring that up, because below the surface there is a debate and discussion, and it's very legitimate, about immigration levels. Because we saw pre-COVID, 400,000 per year were coming into Canada for decades. During COVID, the federal government put it up to 1.2 million. International students, families, asylum seekers. We all came as immigrants or refugees. My family came as refugees. It's not about that. It's about let me quickly finish. The lack of employment opportunities that has resulted in, we've heard numerous times, international students working below the minimum wage at $10, $11, $12 an hour, because labor is now plentiful, and big business employers in general are now doing this because they can, right? And this has hurt, folks who are here for, I hate to use the time as a construct, but are unable to find minimum wage jobs because by virtue of simple economics, saturate the market with labor, wages come down. And that's something that we need to articulate to government, is that when you're increasing immigration, I'm not saying you don't go above 400. Going from 400 to 1.2 is a drastic, significant change without the housing, without the social and physical infrastructure, and without the economic opportunities. Why do we have half of our housing crisis is very much a reflection of that. And the employment question is a huge issue. And to Walied's earlier point, what's the root cause of violence?
Poverty.
It's not culture and race.
Poverty.
Like our
A
premier,
lack of
it's poverty,
opportunities.
right? You know?
Not being given a fair chance, you go and you put in a resume,
Yeah.
and instead of being properly represented by that employer or employee, they're telling you, oh, we prefer an immigrant who can barely speak English.
Who won't call them to the employment standards and labor
Thank you.
laws. Yeah.
And then there is Canadians and Torontonians who have finished high school, who have the ability and have had the privilege and the opportunity to learn how to speak, learn math in this hemisphere of the world, and want to have to provide for themselves.
So we need to articulate, so, you know, it's part of what I hope comes out of this with SCAN, SCRO, SUN, and all the other groups is that we articulate these to our representatives, right? Because the majority of representatives in Scarborough are part, and this is the irony, are part of all three governing parties. Red, blue, and as you know, many of the councillors supported the mayor, right? And voted for this budget, myself included, right? Is we need to say, hey, you're ruling, you're governing, you're in the party with the power. We need to see these addressed. Immigration levels, economic opportunities, housing, social investment, etc. Maybe if there's Ron?
So first of all, thanks Gulick for Scan and commentators too, and all the people here in Scarborough.
Thank you.
And Philip, who's recording this, Sun's gonna send that out on our Facebook and through the other community centers. We're connected to over 30 community centers, groups, resident groups in Scarborough, and hundreds of people individually too that will share information, be awareness. This is a very important topic, and I hope that we'll be able to take this through the other thing. The other thing is, to start something starts with one person. Then you talk to the next person, and guess what? They're on the same page as you. Then it goes in. That's how your group starts. And then once you get that group together, there's another group you bump into and say, what's your, oh, can we get together?
Change.
The one voice is what makes it important. Your voice is only one voice. When you put hundreds of people together and you go to politicians, now they listen. So that's the key thing, and it's a small step, it's a baby step, and it just flows through. You'd be amazed at how it can work. Because they have the right message, people will come. And that's what you want. So we have a lot of commonality here. It's just trying to get it through the weeds to make it work. We have we're 25% of the city. We have 6 wards with 6 councillors.
Yes, I'm aware.
And you know what? They all have to be on the same page too.
That's right.
Okay,
And
so
we
we
have
can
to
be on
hold
the
them
same page,
accountable.
but if we don't connect all these dots,
Right.
we got one right now that's here. Thank you very much.
And
And
I
we need
appreciate
more,
it.
we need more.
Were the others invited to come here, as far as you know?
Yes.
Sorry?
Were the others invited to come here, as far as you know?
Some of them were, some couldn't come, but
Right.
we didn't invite everyone. We invited ones closer to this end
Here.
of the city.
But it's also very important with politicians, is to hear the voices, right? So
Yeah.
if they don't hear you.
Oh, no
they
way.
make their own decisions. So you gotta look at
Yeah, me and my family.
and stand up for what you're doing.
Well, I know there's
Well, I
another
stand, I
speaker,
believe in
so.
Canada.
Yeah.
I believe in Canada. I believe in a proud Canada.
Last question?
I believe
Last
in
question,
Canada.
last question.
Yeah.
Oh, did you wanna go?
We'll take 2, it's okay.
Yeah. Do you wanna
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just gonna ask him, or it was partly a statement, partly a question, and really for both of you up there. One of the things we notice when we do this, try and get things happening in the community is that the funding is temporary. It'll be like for a short period of time, a year, or for a very specific project. And one of the things I think that it's important that councillors think about and work with the community on is coming up with funding that is ongoing, so that you're not always having to reapply and try and reinvent yourself over and over and over again and competing with, I noticed especially for some of the, especially in neighborhood improvement areas, there's funding available for those areas, but again, it's very project specific, it's not long-term, and while that's great for that event that might happen, and it might bring people together, and it might get that sort of, momentum going, then it just drops off because there's nothing happening after that, and they have to reapply or try and get it again. So that's one thing that I think needs to happen.
That's problematic.
And I might have missed it, but that $2 million that you said was allocated, is that ongoing? Is it every year? Is it stretched out
It's
over time?
$500,000 per year
Oh,
for
okay.
5 years. So it
Okay.
is sustainable funding, so there's a commitment
Right.
of 5 years from council, and then the community decides how that, but there's some other challenges
shared
which I will talk about.
Okay, but yeah, so it is like on, so that's helpful. And then my other question was, you said there was like 100 stakeholders at, how do you get 100 stakeholders?
So we've got
By
we
networking
have
and
12,000 residents of Regent Park, around 12,000, maybe 13,000 now. 70% are market, 30% are TCC. To get 100 stakeholders, there were many groups. There are many grassroots groups, there are many agencies that operate in Regent Park. And we also have the community building working groups, so they also account, the working groups of the SDP also account as stakeholders as well. So they can send people to vote on decisions, for example.
So they all come together in one place?
One big meeting,
Oh,
we
geez, wow.
decide, yeah.
Okay.
So for example, at our last meeting, we made a decision to ask this SDFA to release the $500,000 that was paused last year in May, right? So they basically said we wanted to do two things before we release the funds. And the residents came together through the stakeholders table and said, we want the funding released now. We
Okay,
do not need any delay. So it's a means to hold each other accountable.
yeah.
So
and
it's
that's
very
all,
critical,
yes.
it's very important, yeah. It's a way to make sure the community voice is out there.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I guess, yeah.
it's me
Yes,
again.
sir, yeah.
I need a clarification from you. When you said X amount is market and X amount is TCHC. What I know about TCHC, it has rent-a-care and it has market. So when you say market and TCHC, could you
Elaborate, yeah.
explain? Because TCHC
So
has a whole lot of
TCHC,
market.
when I say 30% TCHC, I mean 30% rent geared to income, RGI. When I say 70%, that is mostly market, and we do
When you
have.
say market, are you talking private market?
I'm trying to make that distinction. We don't have that, I don't have that specific data, but I do know that in TCHC, there is rent geared to income, and then there's something called affordable housing. And I
And there is
always
market
say,
rent.
there's no way you can call that affordable. 80% of market is, you're asking a Regent Park family to earn, if phases 4 and 5 are completed, $90,000 to $95,000 to live in a 1-bedroom. How is that affordable? No, who makes 90K? Who?
I'm not talking about the
So-
affordable. I just need to know the market. It's when you say market, because I know that buildings in TCHC, it's all market. And I know even in buildings where people assume it's all RGIs,
Are
people
not.
pay market rent. in
Yes, they
there.
pay 80% of market.
So that is
right.
the reason when you say TCHC and market, because
So-
people just assume everybody in TCHC is paying next to
I'm
nothing.
gonna double check this because this is the
Please.
first time this distinction has come up, but I suspect when I say 30% TCC, it's both RGI and 80% market, because when we categorize 70% of market, it's non-TCHC,
So the 70%
buildings.
is not TCHC.
yeah.
And all your TCHC is just, in Regent Park right now, is just.
Either RGI or affordable.
In Regent Park, there are people that are paying market.
Yeah, they're paying market, you're right.
Yes,
Your take on
I'm paying TCHC, I'm paying market.
Yeah, I know. It's not right.
You're waiting for one.
Thank you. So, in 2017, there was something called the Priority Schools Initiative. And what that did, that gave community agencies the ability to go into schools.
And the lower rate and the subsidy.
You got it.
Yeah.
So for the months of June, July, and August, we were in there. It was an extra space, right? So we created a youth hub. That is no longer.
It's province, the PSI was a transfer payment
It was.
from the province to the school.
It
to
was.
Yeah.
So that's been scrapped.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to that a bit. I know you had some experience on the school board. I'm wondering if there are any other avenues
Yeah.
where community groups can get into these vacant schools throughout the months of July and August, as an additional space in specifically this community. There is 2 giant schools that sit vacant for the months of July and August. And what we did is we used these spaces as hubs throughout the summer months. And so I'm wondering if there's anything similar to that, or if you know of any other pathways that we can take to kind of get there.
So I'm new to council, but I think this is a brilliant idea to champion at June 18th. Please get your contact information to Walied through me. If you can come depute, we can, it's likely tough for this summer because the budget's already been set in February, but really what we wanna do is to set the budget up, which passes in February, but really the work starts getting done in August, September, really. So we wanna start setting that agenda. It's an example of, the hypocrisy of Ford. I hate to get political again, but he did the photo op for his brother's renaming the stadium. And he had, players from the team that he used to coach in the needs improvement area. But then when he got into office 2018, he cut the PSI, Priority School Initiative funding. And then he expands booze everywhere, which his brother suffered from. The data is very clear from public health. The more exposure to alcohol and booze, the more it harms marginalized, lower income, and those who struggle with substance abuse, right? So it's same old anyway. But that's, I appreciate you sharing that idea, because I totally forgot about it, because it was cut 6-7 years ago.
That's right.
And that's a great idea. Instead of the province do it, the city can initiate that, right?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Parthi. Everyone give a huge round of applause again for Alright, so save the best for last. Jasminder is a gender justice advocate through an intersectional feminist and trauma-informed lens. She's a graduate of the University of Oxford's Master's in Criminology and Criminal Justice, and has a double degree in political science and criminology from the University of Toronto. She has extensive experience working in the field of gendered violence prevention, particularly human trafficking prevention. Jasminder is a policy advisor and EDI lead at Victim Services Toronto, and has worked on a gender-based violence prevention strategy for Toronto, Peel, Durham, and Halton regions. She's also developed an online Ontario-wide course on human trafficking available to all colleges. She has extensive experience leading and assisting research and policy analysis through work experience at the Ministry of the Attorney General, UJ Legal, and Community Legal Education Ontario, to name a few. As a South Asian woman, she's passionate about social justice and anti-oppressive practices. So everyone, give a round of applause to my friend Jasminder.
Thank you for that introduction, Walied. I really appreciate it, and thank you to all of you for the work that you do and just showing up here, dedicating your time to come out on a Thursday evening to stand up for your community. I think it really is what makes change. So just very grateful to be in the presence of you all, and grateful to Walied and Scan for having me here. So I'm here on behalf of Victim Services Toronto, and I recognize that we are a more mainstream agency. We get a lot more mainstream funding. But there are a lot of lessons that we've learned as a more mainstream agency in terms of how to secure funding, how to get that funding sustainably, and I do think that the lessons that we learned there are applicable at the grassroots level, and it also does give us some of the knowledge base as to how we can actually transform systems to go from a little bit smaller to how we actually are able to grow that, expand it, and make it a little bit bigger. So Victim Services Toronto, essentially what we do is we provide supports and resources to anybody who is a victim of a crime or a sudden tragedy. When I say crime, easy to understand what a crime is. Sudden tragedy includes things like fires, suicide, sudden death, things along those lines. And when it comes to the support that we provide in communities, it really is focused on that support after something has taken place. And then we do also focus on the prevention piece as well. And we're gonna talk about both those aspects. But what Victim Services does and has done since 1996 is it provides an alternative for people who may not want to go to the police after a crime has occurred. It provides a space that is focused solely on survivors. It is solely focused on people who have been victimized and want to rebuild their life. Not everybody who's been victimized necessarily wants to report to the police and have an investigation into the crime. Many people who experience a crime just want to move forward. They just want to be able to get their life back, right? And that includes getting things like financial assistance, that includes getting things like, assistance. So the financial assistance that we provide, it is through the Ontario government, so we do have some limitations, but we can provide things like, say there's a break-in, we can provide new locks on the door. Say there is, somebody, got jumped at school, we can provide you with like a Ring doorbell, for example, so you know maybe who's knocking on your door. Or say you're fleeing intimate partner violence, right? You moved into a new place. We'll share an example of one person that we supported. She was a victim of human trafficking. She actually had her dog, and her dog was gifted to her by her trafficker, and the dog actually had like a tracking chip in the dog. So we moved her. We were able to basically get funding, move her into a new home. She moved into the new home. Trafficker shows up. And so because we were able to kind of move her, and then we also got funding to get her that Ring doorbell, she was able to see who it was through the app, hide in a closet, and then call for help. And then once help came, we were able to figure out, okay, what's going on, relocated her again. It happened one more time before we were like, okay, we need to do like a thorough investigation, right, as to what's going on and why this person's able to continue to find you, right? But that's an example of like, when we're talking about people not being able to leave situations that are unsafe or harmful for them, many people are not staying because they want to. Many people are staying because of the exact same issues that we are talking about today. People cannot leave because they cannot afford to leave. People cannot walk out of that door because once you walk out of that door, where are you going? How are you getting there? What are you eating tonight? What are your kids gonna eat, right? That is the issue that we hear for people time and time and time again. And we've heard that gender-based violence has gone up since the pandemic. It has not gone back down. If anything, it's gotten worse. And the people who we're supporting, seeking them more attempts to actually be able to leave those situations because of lack of access to things like housing. So we support over about 17,000 people a year. We've grown as an agency from being very small and having a couple of people to now we have over 70 people that we employ as an agency. And so in terms of some of the lessons from that, a couple of things. So one is, we always aim as much as possible to be able to go out, let the community know what we do, right? That first and foremost is the most important, because if you don't know our services are here, who are you going to call, right? The second is rebuilding trust where trust has been broken. We recognize that at Victim Services we have failed many, many times, and in particular, especially historically, we have failed marginalized communities, especially racialized communities, absolutely, and we recognize that, and our goal is to understand what's gone on, what's gone wrong, and how do we fix it, how do we change it going forward so that nobody else experiences those same issues again. So it's a willingness to listen and a willingness to understand that when you operate within a system, we operate and we live within a white supremacist society. We're gonna make mistakes, right? Operating within that system, and so then we have to open ourselves up to criticism, we have to open ourselves up to learning, and being able to hear feedback from the community and saying, okay, we're gonna make a change accordingly, right? So building those connections, listening to feedback, understanding how to rebuild trust, and then of course just providing the supports to community as well. Another huge thing that we do is prevention, so a lot of education stuff. So we do education around gender-based violence, online safety, human trafficking, and more. I've gone into schools and done presentations myself. I've done many Scarborough schools, like Melbourne, things like that. Just been there in the community, talking to the youth and hearing firsthand their accounts of what it's like. Thank you so much for joining us today. Not a problem at all. Thank you, really appreciate it. So there's that prevention piece that's really important as well. So those are kind of some of the key things that we do, the key areas that we kind of attempt to build and rebuild and continue to figure out so that essentially we can support the communities that really need our help. The other big thing when we're talking about sustainable funding and being able to get sustainable funding, I'm sure that Walied and Walied will have some tips around things like grant writing, how to get funding. I think a really important issue was raised around project-based funding, and it's absolutely unsustainable. Essentially, what a lot of organizations want is they want a project that you can say, 10,000 people showed up, we did this and we did that, and, we got an A+ on this one project, but in the long term, right, what are we actually doing to be able to build community? So I absolutely agree that that's funding that we need to fight for, and I think one of the other big challenges is that in a lot of places, they don't want to fund staffing. And the reality is that if you do not fund people to be able to show up, it is so challenging to live in this economy. It is challenging to be able to afford a roof over your head, food to eat, transit to take, and people have less and less free time because they're working a job, and then they have either a side hustle or a side gig or, a second job, and for many people, third jobs as well, right? Myself included. So, when we're thinking about that time, right, how are we actually going to be able to invest in communities if we're not investing in the people who are building those communities up, right? So we really need to be able to invest in that staffing as well. I think with that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit the brakes here, and I do wanna open it up in case anybody has any questions for me. I also wanna leave space at the end for people to continue snacking and be respectful of time, because snacking is important. And we have shawarma here, so shout outs to that, excellent choice. But I will open it up to questions in terms of, some of the programming that we provide. Also open to hearing feedback as well if folks have, perhaps not had any positive experiences, so we can continue to rebuild as well and kind of figure out what we need to do differently. And then also, if anybody wants information on our prevention programming as well, education for youth, we go into for free. This is totally free of cost. Go into schools free of cost. We have summer programming now. For students with developmental disabilities that they're able to sign up for in order to learn more about gender-based violence, because we know that's one of the groups of youth that is the most vulnerable to experiencing these forms of violence.
How about for old age?
For older age, that's a great question. We want to be able to expand it. We need the funding as well. So
because I am from I do like old age, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the other things that we need as well, but we also do presentations as well for older people in the community too. But I will be honest, a lot of it is focused on how to keep young people safe. But I will say almost every single time I go and do an adult focused presentation, people come up.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
go
ahead.
You said young women safe. What about your old people safe?
Absolutely, I agree. Yep.
Yes.
100%.
There is a lot of people that happens to be crazy drivers, and I was one time I was walking across just a street, not a street, but by the lights, and a crazy driver almost hit me. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What about your old people? You said young people to be safe. And what about your old people? You know, certainly like 50 and up,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People can be vulnerable at any age, right? And yeah,
because I have family, and what happened to me, right? And what I'm going to do with my family, where they going to live?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. What about your older people?
Absolutely, and we do provide, so here's the thing, we provide this support to anybody of any age, especially if they've been the victim of any type of crime or sudden tragedy. The thing is, a lot of the prevention and education programming is focused on youth, so that's the distinction there. So the supports and resources are there no matter what the age. It's just a lot of the education focuses on youth, and the reason being, it's we're trying to create that cultural shift as well, right? You teach young people, you teach them when they're young, and it kind of creates that shift for generations going forward. But I agree with you, every single generation deserves to learn, every single generation deserves to have that knowledge. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, I really appreciate it.
Amazing
Yeah, thank you, it was a great question.
Is your organization involved with people who are victims of theft, specifically theft of a car or a bicycle or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and so our crisis line is 24/7, it's 24/7. We operate every single day. There's always somebody that's sitting at our crisis lines. So you can give us a call and we do, we're not 911, so we are like 2 or 3 people who are always, at a crisis line. So on occasion, you may have to leave a voicemail, but we do always respond within 48 hours to the voicemail, ideally within.
And when you say respond, you could respond also by email as opposed to calling somebody back.
Yes, if you provide your email,
Yes.
we will respond by email as well.
Okay, well, I didn't know there was this 24-hour number. What is it?
It's 416-808-7066. So if anybody else wants to pull out their phone, because this is a good alternative. So say you might not be a victim and that's okay, but say something happens to a friend or a family member or somebody that you hear about and you're like, oh, hold on, wait, like you can go get your locks changed today and you're not gonna have to pay for it. Like they can call up a locksmith, we'll do it all, you know what I mean? We'll help coordinate it for you. Having our phone number on hand is important, right? So
Can I say
I'll
something?
say it again.
Yeah.
Give me just one moment. I'm gonna repeat the phone number and then I would love to hear what you have to say. So 416-808-7066. One last time, 416-808-7066, just to make sure that you saved it correctly. Okay, perfect. Yep, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, this is a real life scenario. I'm gonna try not to cry,
I will say if you have a real life scenario,
but this is not related to
I
myself.
would like to chat about it privately, just because if somebody else in the room is aware of that person,
Well,
or they might know who they are,
I highly
just-
doubt it.
just for their own safety, because we never know, right? Like with community, sometimes somebody knows somebody. I always do this for any presentation. I always say that if it's a question about general safety, we ask it in the community.
Plus, we're recording it too, so
Yeah,
if
and
anybody
we're
watching.
recording-
So my
Yeah.
concern is, I thought today coming out to this, group event, there was going to be, a much more, in terms of turnout, in terms of individuals who represent the, municipal and elective and legislative aspect of our populace. Now, I'm disappointed that I didn't see more faces.
Yeah.
And for the mere simple fact that safety, for every and each person that's in this room here, and for those that are not present in this room, safety looks different, okay? But safety, and every human being deserves the right to feel safe in their habitat, in their home, in their backyard, at a local park, going for a swim, okay, after an exhausting week at work, with a bunch or a group of rambunctious children with all different personalities from all different walks of life. Now, I contacted victim services and expressed myself to victim services and inquired about what services victim services has to offer. And I received correspondence nonstop, but that didn't resolve the trauma or the issue that plagues Toronto and the whole entire world.
Yeah.
Now, in order to have the positive dialect, I personally feel and professionally feel that every human being, as a child of God, has more than an obligation, more than a role. And for the 70% of staff that represent that entity and that body, there is so much more work that needs to be done. Because there are children, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, nieces and nephews who have not been grandfathers, grandmothers, uncles and aunties, and distant relatives and cousins from the east coast to the north coast to the west coast and back to the south that have been affected positively and negatively by something that they did not foresee, they did not plan for, they did not prepare for, they did not put themselves in harm's way. Walking down the street and minding your business and then getting struck by a TTC because of negligence, and then calling victim services to say, okay, listen, I don't wanna talk about it, but I need help.
Yeah.
And then someone on the other end saying, I understand, but yet you haven't even gathered the facts
Yeah,
The evidence.
of why I'm even calling,
yeah.
or why the person's even calling. And then you sit on the phone. I don't know if any of you have experienced or I know anyone who's experienced this.
Yeah, and I welcome the feedback as well, right? Like,
So
this is
in terms of
important.
a
Yeah,
lot
this is
of
so important.
the services, I've observed that there's a lot of asylums tapping into those services.
Yeah,
A lot of asylums are tapping into and reaping the benefits of those services. Now our ancestors and forefathers and individuals that represented the Constitution in a positive way, God rest Maloney's soul in peace, Brian Mulroney, sorry, because he stood for families, he stood for togetherness, and he was an example
yeah.
of that.
Yeah,
in
and
the community.
I really appreciate you bringing this up, because I think one of the really key points that you touched on here as well is about what you said about everybody deserves to feel safe, right?
Yeah.
Every single person deserves to feel safe, and I think the other really important thing that you also touched on was like, it's also about systemic safety, right?
Thank you.
So until the point that we get the investments that actually are resulting in people not living in poverty, of people having affordable housing, of people being able to have food to eat and there's no food insecurity, we are going to continue to have these issues taking place over and over and over again. And even at Victim Services, we recognize that we are a part of the aftermath, right? But what we want to also be a part of, which is why we do the prevention programming, is being a part of the solution. And I understand the disappointment that you felt today of not seeing more elected officials here. I'm sorry I'm not an elected official, but I'm the policy advisor at Victim Services. So the things that you all share here as well do also impact the policies that we end up championing as an organization and bring to other people at the provincial, federal, and municipal levels as well. So I hope that's helpful, and I do just want to be mindful of time because I am seeing 3 hands up. So is it okay if
my
we?
question is,
Yeah.
Elizabeth Frey, is that also a partner
Elizabeth Fry is one of our partners, but they're a separate organization. They're a separate entity.
that catered just to women?
Yes, but they'll also support non-binary folks as well, to my understanding.
Okay.
Alright, so I guess maybe we're gonna ask for last round of questions, since the event is drawing to a close. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. So we have these 3.
Okay, so we'll go 1, 2, 3. Is that all right? Okay.
I want to go first, because I raised my hand many times.
Yes.
Okay, no worries. You can go right on ahead. You can,
Yes.
no worries. It's okay.
My question is, I want to follow the senior safety.
Mm-hmm.
Safety is not for attack, physical attack. I want mental health safety, physical health safety, financial health safety, and police, housing health safety. And I give you one example. People is getting older and older in this area. I have been living in Scarborough almost 20 years. One example I can give to you, Stephen Leacock, Kennedy and McNichol community is a liberal community. Each time we went there, returned, because first come, first serve, no enough place. So we catch it, and I did not see new libraries, new communities are built around this area. I just see the population is increasing fastly, and the people now is half a year. The senior, more people reaching senior years. Where's the service?
Yeah, yeah.
Each time we go to the community, we want to health safety, and go back. We call the community park the phone line. No answers. And this, your call is really important for us. And the next time, 30 minutes done. I cannot continue to wait.
Yeah.
The time. No answers. So this, my question is, how do you help us to increase the senior services for us, gardenings and plannings, and helping each other build this place, play the ping pong, play the game, and the library is very limited.
Yeah.
And the community centers return to us. And people getting older and older. 12 years is more, it's older years, more than senior years. Where's the safety?
I agree. I think seniors.
So where's the safety?
Yeah, we need investments for seniors in communities and to make sure that they're also able to stay within their communities that they have been living in as well. Right?
I want to do yoga. I want to save money for
and be able to enjoy, right? Absolutely, and be able to enjoy your retirement as well.
Everything. I save the money to the house, to the
Yeah.
doctors. Each time waiting for the doctor appointment, hours.
Yeah.
Who rich?
No, it's very
Doctors
tough.
rich.
And I think I'm gonna perhaps leave that with the community organizers that are in the community themselves to maybe figure out some ways that the conversation can continue.
Yes.
And we can look at ways that you all can work together to continue building that up, right? But I do think that's, you know, as Walied was saying earlier, the programs that are being built are not just like you give money and a community is all of a sudden okay. You give funding to programs that are supporting people in the community, and then that is what creates healthy communities, right? So absolutely, that's a great point, and I definitely think for people of all ages, you know, it definitely needs to be happening. So maybe let's do this, let's reverse how are we for time?
So I see 1, 2, 3 more questions, so maybe
Okay.
why don't you take all 3 at a
We'll
time
do,
and try to.
yeah, how about we take all 3 of them together, and then
Let's do it.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
Although we didn't start right at 6, did we?
We did sort of, I do wanna be mindful of the time that we end though, because then they're gonna be like, that girl, she stood up on the
They overstayed
podium,
their
she went
time,
stop
they need to
talking.
get
I
out.
just wanted to eat
Yeah.
shawarma and some
It's
cookies.
disruptive, and then you need to call the cops, maybe, to kind of, we don't want to.
Okay, perfect, alright, really quick, we'll do like a bit of more of like a rapid fire, would you like to
Cool.
go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here. So, I work at a place called Rosie Hall, and we support young women, many of whom we see have been trafficked.
Yeah.
A lot of young women that we see are pregnant on arrival, or they're parenting. So they've been homeless for months and months at a time, and they come to us. We do a lot of therapeutic work with them. One of the things that we struggle with sometimes is the connection between victim services and police, or is there a connection?
No, there isn't.
If you can maybe speak to that a bit. A lot of the young women that we support really want to go to victim services, but there is that
The fear, right, yeah.
shade of the town police service getting involved.
Systematical stigma
Yeah,
that's associated.
I wonder if, one, you can maybe speak to that a little bit, and
Okay.
two, I think it'd be great for you to come out and speak to our young women at maybe a presentation in the summer at some
Yeah.
point, so I'd like to connect with you afterwards.
Absolutely, let's definitely connect and happy to come out and present. I think I've been there about 2 years ago.
We'll have you.
Yeah, so, always happy to come back. And then, and of course, I know like in terms of the timeline, like people are always cycling in and out, so yeah, I think it's so important, like even to be here like every 6 months or so. But, so just for everybody's knowledge, because I think it's important, Victim Services is a separate not-for-profit organization that is separate from the police. However, what I do want to acknowledge is that there is a partnership with the police where every time a crime occurs, the police tells us, or we have access to their database so that way we could call people and follow up.
Okay.
What that means is we have access to things like police laptops, and things along those lines, and we do also have some donated office space from the police as well. So some of our staff are working out of certain police stations. So that's what, and we do have some spaces as well that are not located within police stations as well.
Okay.
But that is where that interconnection kind of comes from and where that intersection is. And I think it's an important one, but what I wanna emphasize is Toronto Police, we get their information, none of our information goes to them.
That's what I wanted to
It's,
know. whether
it
goes
does
the
not
other way.
go the other way, and if
Thank
you report to us, it will 100% remain
Got it.
confidential.
Got it.
And in terms of our human trafficking unit, honestly, phenomenal. We have several survivors who are on our human trafficking intervention team. Really supportive, very understanding, like they've been in the game, they've been in the life, they understand what it's like. And so it's really that like peer-to-peer, that deep support. So it's honestly, it's like, I can't say enough good things about the program, but we understand why people might be hesitant to connect. But like I could even bring like one of, you know what I mean? Like some of our workers do something and they can chat, right? So yeah, happy to do that as
That'd
well.
be
But
great.
that's a great question. I think it's important for everybody. Sorry, you had a question as well. You had your
Question
hand
is
up.
the phone number that you had just gave us, is there like interpreter to help non-speakers? And also, have you had the opportunity to connect with nonprofits and teach them about, the programs you would have for non-English speakers?
Yeah, so that is a great question. So we have over 35 languages in-house in terms of our own staff and volunteers. And then we have access to interpreters for over 300 different languages. So we definitely have access to that. And then we are also connected with many different community organizations that are not-for-profits that specifically serve the needs of those of communities where, you know, English may not be their primary language. And we're always open to looking for new partnerships. So if anybody's like, I don't know if my organization that I go to is connected, like send us an email and we're happy to connect and build that partnership up and meet with people so that everybody starts feeling comfortable referring to us. We start feeling comfortable referring to them as well. But it's a great question. It's accessible in over 300 languages.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
We have one more question.
Yeah.
I find there's a disconnect between residents and their community, and they're not aware of the services. Some are free, some are subsidized. They're not aware of the services that are being offered. Some of the, you said yoga is offered on Zoom or in person, $40 a year. And the $40 include, you have 5 days a week programming. So there are things in there, but you have to know what is being offered in your community. Some programs are offered, you don't have to live in that community to access that program. At Daniel Spectrum, I love there on a Sunday, you could go, and the youths are there, the program for computers there. So that is the only place I see that is open, not 24/7, 7 days a week. In other communities, a lot of other communities, they close on a Friday, maybe open on a Saturday, because the agency has a program designated for that time. But other than that, there is nothing for the youth.
Yeah.
That's why you need community governed space.
Yes.
Community governed space, because agencies do close at 5 o'clock. And that's why we took over the space in Daniel Spectrum. And on Fridays or over the weekend, sometimes it's just a safe space for youth. And there's programming going on until like 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes, right? And we have security there, you know, that's making sure that everything is good. So, you know, you have to make sure that you as a community get to make the decisions on the operations of your community space.
But it also depends on funding.
And you can get funding.
funding.
Just search AOCC. Go Google that. AOCC.
Write down.
AOC, the Association of Community. It's a City of Toronto funded initiative that funds spaces like the 519 or these other community centers that get direct funding to address what Jasminder mentioned earlier, which is taking care of core funding, staffing, so that the building is operational, right? And by the way, we've done it. Like when I was in the Students' Union, when I was president of the Students' Union, we took over management of our student center. Did what we wanted. All I did was send a letter to the vice president and principal threatening to sue them. They didn't release the funds, and they cut that check quick. You know, but that's how we do it. We take charge. There's no excuses.
We take initiative.
Take charge to it, not just initiative. Charge.
And be a
Lead it. Lead it as well.
Leadership, yes.
Exactly.
But also take your chances to do it,
Yeah.
you know? Some people don't want to have.
Thank you for coming out, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, give a huge round of applause to our All right, folks. Just before we go, I just wanted to say this is just the beginning of a conversation. Community safety, like many people have said, looks so different in so many different in every neighborhood. And what we want to do is scan is work with different community members to try to see how that looks like, so we can get the city to fund it in the next budget. So this is the start of many conversations. And if you're a part of an agency or a group that's doing based work in your neighborhood and want to join us and work with us in our steering committee, we're looking for new members for our steering committee. Please just find me after this and let us know, and then we can start to continue these conversations. Also, we have Anthony here. He's going to just quickly plug a program that is running out of this FAXA.
Thank you so much. I don't want to take your time.
Yeah, you do.
You just did.
We have new program in this new community, like Regent Park, family well-being. So we are supporting the parents who has kids from 10 years to 29. So we are supporting the parents how they can navigate their free resources in the community.
Okay, that would apply.
Yeah. So
Well, that's on
You ain't 29?
She might know someone.
Charlie, pipe it down. She's not 29.
No, that's fair. That's not my question.
Carry on. Still have her, no problem. But this is specifically for
They're senior
parents.
programs, don't
But
worry.
anyone can come and ask us
Yeah, so
any questions.
if you have people that you know that need resources for the kids, here you go. This is the place to start.
We have our coordinator number or email, so you can connect with us. Thank you.
I still don't